Python has been around since 1991. It was mainly created for readability, simplicity, and getting things done with a few lines of code. It was generally used like everywhere, from developing software to task automation, data analysis, data visualization, and of course, web development. And mostly on the back end web. That's why Python is like called general programming language, general purpose programming language. But what about Python on the front end side web? Hello, my name is Jabez Emmanuel Borja, a software developer at StackSpacePH, and this talk is called Python on the client side web. And let's talk more about it. I know a lot of you might have already know what is a client side web development or front end development, but let's deep dive more about it. So I asked ChatGPT about what is client-side web development or front-end development in programming. So ChatGPT says front-end development, also known as client-side development, is the practice of producing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for a website or web application so that a user can see and interact with them directly. So traditionally, we use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript when doing front-end development. Python on the client-side web isn't really a new thing. Did you know that Python also had a play on the client-side web space? It was up until 1999, Rosum created a custom web browser called Grail. It was written in only Python, but basically, obviously, it was just basically an experiment, and it really never took off. Building UIs for the client-side web is really hard, especially when it became more complex and it's getting out of hand. That's why frameworks such as React, Vue, and Svelte and other JavaScript libraries or frameworks simplify the process. But as you can see that all of them are made in JavaScript, right? We need a more beginner-friendly way that simplifies the process too. Like imagine you can create a reactive client-side web application using only Python. Like what would be the good thing about it, right? We really wanted to make it happen, so we did something like this, dog. So yeah, we did some thinking, and yeah, we started working on a framework called PyFyre. PyFyre is a client-side web framework for building reactive web user interfaces using only Python. It's like React, Vue, Svelte, but it's Python. PyFyre runs on the client-side web browser itself, not on a server. Well, there are also Python frameworks that also wanted to allow developers to use Python on the web. There is VuePy, Sculpt, Transcript that also does the same thing. So if there is such frameworks such as them, now why PyFire, right? Why PyFire? PyFyre allows you to create a truly reactive web application only using Python. You don't have to touch HTML, CSS, or even JavaScript. Now I'll show you what I mean by this. Okay, okay, there we go. Okay, all right. Now, okay. Now, this is a PyFire playground. Now, if you want to play with an experiment with PyFire without ever creating a new project, you just want to, experiment and have fun, you can visit https pyfire.netlify.app. As you can see, it's running on Netlify. That is PyFire in production, and I'm going to talk more about it later. So here, you can visit it on pyfire.netlify.app/playground. So yeah, here is a simple count. Here is a simple Hello World app created in Python with PyFire, and it's running on the playground. Now, yeah, so Hello World here, as you can see here, it rendered the Hello World. Now I want to change this something like Hello PyCon PH 2023. As you can see that it changed quickly without ever reloading. That is the reactivity of PyFire on the browser. Like it's Python. It's Python really. It's Python, and you're creating a web front end with Python. Now let's try to add another text right here. So you can see that there's an errors, it errors handling, there are error boundaries in PyFire that also is same feature as Remix and Next.js. It's actually inspired by that. So yeah, let's add another text. Nice. As you can see here that there is a nice, and yeah, that's pretty awesome, right? And yeah, so I'm going to explain that here we have an element. So I'm going to talk more about it later. So uh, um, it every HTML element represents an element object. This is a element object of P that equivalent on HTML. So yeah, moving on, let's talk about another one, the simple counter app created with PyFire. So you want to see the reactivity of PyFire like there. So as you can see here, they click 0 times. If clicked, it will increment the count. So it's really awesome, right? It's really awesome, and it's only Python. So yeah, so wait a little bit. Okay, let me just. All right, all right. So yeah, so as you can see here that we initialized the count state on init method. As you can see here, that is what increments when it clicked, and yeah, it with initial of 0 and it's an integer with type. And here is the build method. Here is where rendering starts. And we have a button that increments the method on every click plus 1. So set value, that value plus 1. So it's really self-explanatory. Now you have noticed that we have, in our button, there is a lambda function here. Lambda function here. So yeah. So on our lambda function, uh, it is basically, if you don't know what it is, uh, it is basically a Pythonic one-line anonymous function. So if you know JavaScript, it's basically an anonymous arrow function like this one, like this one. That is just basically lambda function, but it is implemented on Python. Now, this is a crucial part for PyFire's reactivity. Instead of running the whole widget, when a state change, it will just run the lambda function where the state change, and it will just update the DOM, surgically. So if you're a Flutter user, I know that this quite of syntactic sugar of PyFire is almost the same as Flutter, and yeah, it was actually inspired by Flutter. I love Flutter. So yeah. Now I've shown you the stable version of PyFire. The new version of PyFire, which is actually still on experimental and still not on public yet, we are slowly transitioning to functional widgets. Like this one, you just have to declare a method for your widget instead of a class. Now it's really Pythonic because we harness the power of Python decorators for lifecycles and hooks. As you can see here, we have an onMount whenever this method mounted, and it will just run the onMount. Right here, it will just print the just mounted. It's really pretty cool, right? And yeah, we are working on it. I hope that the time you're watching this, it's already out there. Well, let's see. Now, now let's talk about how does PyFire work? How does really PyFire work? PyFyre transpiles your Python code into native JavaScript with the help of Python. It allows you to use Python but still can harness the power of JavaScript. So you don't need to worry about Python will ever limit to your power to manipulate the browser because out of the box, PyFyre allows you to. Like you can still use that window, the document. You can still get element by ID just like that because everything in JavaScript you can still use in PyFyre with Python. That is the power of it. Now let's talk about its core features. Now, what does PyFyre offers? Now, let's talk about its features and stuff. One of its core features is the JavaScript interoperability. PyFyre allows you to leverage npm packages and integrate with existing JavaScript application with just a Python code. Like you can still use jQuery inside PyFyre API. Now, C Python interoperability. Developers can use, but limitedly, C Python packages on the client-side web. Imagine using Python packages on the client-side web itself, like you don't have to had a server setup or an API to interact with Python, like it's already out of the box, right? And that opens up a new set of possibilities for the web, especially when you can use Python and npm packages all at the same time and they can communicate with each other. That opens up a new set of possibilities, and it's pretty awesome. And its batteries included. PyFyre has routing, state management, etc. that allows it to create a fully functioning web application. Now, the mental model of PyFyre is everything is a widget with a children of HTML element objects. Every element object represents an HTML element on the web browser, and everything has to be a function, mainly for PyFire's reactivity. As you can see here, we have an element that represents HTML div, and that has a child of text. And yeah, speaking of reactivity, how does PyFire reactivity works? So I have a simple counter app example here, just like what we did earlier, that we're going to break down this one. So to declare a reactive state, you have to use PyFire's state object. So here we declare our state variable on our init method, and on the instance of itself, we are initiating on the instance itself here itself, so we could access the value later on throughout the class, throughout the object. Now, what's a good thing about PyFire is it promotes static typing but still on Python. As you can see here that we declared the type of the state as an integer, and we added an initial value of that state. As you can see here, int and 0. If you know React with TypeScript, this is quite familiar, except React state was called useState. Well, state object gives you two properties, set value and value. Set value to set the state value and the value to access it. Going back, and we have a method called increment that increments the count state. As you can see here, we have here self.count, self.value, and we increment the self current value of the self that count plus one. And yeah, and build method only run once, so it doesn't have to like initiate the increment method again. That might cause the memory leaks. So yeah, when a state change, PyFire only re-renders where the state changed. That's why it's truly reactive. I'll show you what I mean by this in a second. So as you can see here that we have a button that whenever clicked, it will run the increment method. Now that's where the lambda keyword comes in. Instead of re-rendering the whole widget when a state changed, it will just run where the state changed. In this case, it just runs the lambda function where because it inside that's where the self.count is on. So it will just run the lambda instead of re-rendering the entire build method of app object. Now I know it's quite magical, right? It's now quite magical. I know it's quite a magic. So well, this approach was coincidentally as the same as SolidJS approach. So there's no really a virtual DOM just like React in other JavaScript libraries or frameworks. Now nesting widgets inside widgets and PyFire is just almost the same as Flutter. You just have to create another widget and import the widget directly. So as you can see here that we had navbar here, class navbar, and text acme inc, and as you can see here that we have right here. Now I bet you might thinking, how does PyFire data fetching in PyFire works? Like, right? Data fetching is the most crucial part or component of a web application. You have to fetch a data from an API or server for your app, right? It's really important. That's where Future Widget comes in. Future Widget allows you to create a synchronous widget in PyFire. Now, as you can see here, that every method is async, right? And in our build method, we await for self.fetch user before even rendering the entire app. So PyFire uses Ajax from Brighton API, um, Ajax from Brighton API, and we wait until it's complete, and we get the JavaScript request object, and we set our state into JavaScript request.json, and after that, it will just re-render in the entire app. Now I've mentioned in PyFire that everything is Python, and I've mentioned that you don't have to use CSS for the web. Now if a website do not have a design, like what's the point of it, right? Valentine's has passed, and I told my crush she's the CSS to my HTML, and she rejected me. Well, not anymore. PyFire only has, you know, inside CSS. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you get that joke. So yeah, moving on. To style your app, you can use the ATTR's property of element object and declare your CSS design there. And we have a class, more scope styles right here. You can use Tailwind, anything like that. And but the downside is it's static and cannot be changed. And it will be messy when your code becomes more complex. That's why we came up with style object to create a theme for your app and change it dynamically on the code. As you can see here that we have self.theme and yeah, and it will just re-render dynamically. It's pretty awesome. But PyFyre core features, now let's talk about PyFyre in production. PyFyre is a static site generator and produces single page application. So it doesn't matter where you publish it, PyFyre bundles your Python code into HTML and native JavaScript for Python to transpile. So you can publish your PyFyre app on Netlify, Vercel, AWS, and wherever you want. It just acts as static site. Yeah, and yeah, enough of talking. Now let's try to get hands on PyFyre. We are going to create a simple app with PyFyre from scratch. Yeah, who's with me? Okay, let's go. Now, so we are now going to create a new PyFire app. So to start, you have to have of course, a Python installed first in your local machine. Now to check if you have a Python installed in your local machine, you just have to type py. And if this dot did not appear in your command line interface or your terminal, it means that you did not install Python correctly. So now we have to create a virtual environment where we are going to install our PyFire. So here, nav env. So this basically means that it is an isolated virtual environment, so we could just install dependencies without affecting the global, I know, Python packages scope. So here, it's not really required. It is optional. So if you don't want to create a virtual environment, but you can still install your PyFire in local machine. But personally, I just tend to do it because for a more cleaner thing. So to install PyFire in your local machine is just one line. So you just basically install it from pip. So of course, sorry, we have to of course activate our environment. So we have to pip install PyFire. Just one line, pip install PyFire. We are now going to wait. Once it's installed, we are going to create our PyFire app. So it's just one line pip install PyFire, and now you can now have PyFire in your local machine. All right. So of course we are going to create an app. So how do we going to create an app with PyFire? So it's just basically one line command. So it's PyFire create is basically PyFire create the name of the app. So in our case, we're going to create a to-do app. So we are going to name our app to-do dash app. So PyFire create the name of the app, PyFire create to-do app right over there. And we are going to go to the the directory of the app. So it's basically um, to do app right there. And now we're going to visit the code and to see the PyFire folder structure, the PyFire project folder structure, so we can now just get more into it. All right. So here we have a public. So in public, here where you sit your assets, your fav icon. As you can see, we have style the CSS. So if you want a CSS on your PyFire app, you can have it right over in the public. So it doesn't really not necessary, but if you want to more cleaner and concise code base, you can have your CSS on the public. You can have the CSS, SCSS, and everything like that. The Tailwind, if you can have right there. I'll talk about where you're going to place your Tailwind later. So here we have SRC. SRC is the main source directory where you're going to main working directory where you are going to work for your PyFire app. So as you can see here, we have index.py. So here is all of the thing. So now I'm going to show what is this contents. So we have to run our PyFire app. So to run our PyFire app is just basically PyFire run. So but you have to sit on a PyFire project directory and PyFyre run, and it will run your PyFyre right there. So it says that we are now serving on our local machine, localhost 5500, and we're just going to copy that and paste it on our Chrome right over there. And there we go. Now we have now PyFire successfully installed on our local machine, and we now have a PyFire project on our local machine. So as you can see here, welcome to PyFire. It's just basically the simple, welcome app to create. We're going to create PyFire. So how about we're going to change this. So hello, PyCon PH 2023. 2023. So as you can see here, that once we saved it, it automatically reloads your browser, so you don't have to. It's basically hot reload, and it's really inspired by React and Flutter, the hot reload. So it will boost your productivity as a developer, and we all want that. So as you can see here, that hello PyCon PH 2023, and there we go. Now I'm going to explain another one. We have get ignore and requirements.txt. It's really self-explanatory, everything like that. And now we have settings.py. Now what is settings.py? It's basically just like package.json for npm and pubspec.yaml for Flutter if you're using Flutter. And yeah, so here all of the settings, all the configurations of your PyFire project. So here we have a routes. Here you're going to set all of your routes when you're creating a PyFire app. So here we have the Python dependencies, the npm dependencies, and all of things like that when you want to configure anything for your PyFire project. So here we have template.html. So what is template.html? So it's basically when you're building a PyFire, when you're building your PyFire production, so it will depend all of that right over right here. So here it will just depend when generating a static site HTML. So right over here, so we now have all of that here in Python and all of things like that. So that's where the PyFire will depend once you built your app. So yeah, now let's go what we're going to do right here. We are going to create a simple to-do app with PyFire. Now let's try to do that. Of course, we're going to delete all of this thing, and of course, once we did that, it will okay. It will of course render none because we have nothing right here. So yeah, now let's try to put a text, of course, right here, just to text if it renders hello world, and right over there, hello world. Now let's try to create the app, and yeah. So of course, when you're creating a to-do app, of course you have to add a text input. So to text input in PyFire's case, here in text input, we have to declare our text input on our init method. So here text input on our init method. It's basically because we are developing the controller for text input for now, but for this case, just for now, we have to put our text input on our init method. So initialize a text input. So we could manipulate we could get the value of it, to manipulate the text input, everything like that. And yeah, text as you can see here, and we are going to put it right over here. And of course, we have to super init method because we can't override our init method of our widget inheritance because we really need that. And yeah, so once we save that, it will have a text input right here, and yeah, awesome. It's now we are now step forward on our building our to do app. So yeah, and of course we have to add of course, a state where we are going to store our to dos, right? So we have state right here. Of course, we have to import that from PyFire, and self dot to dos equals to state right here. So what is the type of the state? So it's basically a list of str. So that is the power of PyFire, that you can have those static typing inside Python. It really supports out of the box. And now we have to add of course, the initial value of our state of our to-dos. So here we're going to have a first to-do just for testing, and we have to okay, in React, if you're going to loop through a list, you have to add a dot map. But in PyFire, you can just have a list builder, just like Flutter. It's really inspired by Flutter. So list builder, of course, we have to uh, list builder right there. And yeah, list builder takes two arguments. This is the count and the item builder. The count is how many times the list builder will loop. So count, in our case, it's the length of self.todos dot value. Is the length of self.todos dot value. And now the item builder just means what widget it will render. So we are going to create a new method to do and pass the index of that. So because item builder passes the index of the loop. So here we're going to return a text, and that is todos dot value, and we're going to index by I and put it right here. So once we save that, that should put right over there. So as you can see here that we have the first to do. It's awesome. And yeah, and of course we have to, once we click here, we have to capture and we have to add a button right here. So it will add a new to do right there. So we have to add a button. So we are going to create a button. We have to get that and button right there. And of course, on every click, we want to add to do. So we are going to create a new um a new method called add to do, and that will pass a JavaScript event object. So that is the power of PyFyre, that it doesn't like limit your power to manipulate the browser. You can still have your JavaScript event object. Like you can still do this prevent default actually, but it's not really that important because PyFire also do that already. So we have now EV, the event. So that is the click event, JavaScript click event. That is the pretty cool thing about PyFire. And now once we have that, we have to check the self dot text input dot value. We have to check if there is a value of the text input. So if there's not, we just ignore that add to do run. So of course we have to append our text input value to do state. So right here to do dot, we have to set the value of that, and of course increment. So the question is, how do we append on state array, right? So here in Flutter, Python, you can just say that to do set value plus a new array. It will just basically, it will merge once you add a new array. So here instead of the text input dot value, and yeah, that is basically it. So we have to pass also the on click once it clicked and add to do. And of course we have to add a children of lambda. So we have a text right over on our button. Oh no, sorry. Say text right there and add to do. And there we go. Now it will not run. It will not run. Because list builder doesn't have a state watcher. So basically it doesn't know that, hey, this to do, I mean self that to do's change its value. So it doesn't know. So we have to add a element of div, and we have to children, of course, children of lambda right here, and there we go, and have the list builder. So we have to have a state watcher, that whenever is a state change, we have to render this thing. So in element object, we have a states. So basically, this is a state dependency, that whenever that a state dependency changed is its value, we are going to re-render this element. So that is the power of it. So we just, in this case, we just have to add the self.to do. So whenever a state change, it would just re-render only this element object. Sorry, to do, sorry about that. So wow, as you can see here, did you mean to do is that is the power of PyFyre error barrier. So as you can see here, there. And we can now have the second to do, and there we go, third to do. And we did not really design it, so yeah, it is, like that. So yeah, we now have created a simple to-do app with PyFyre now. Awesome. So if you have any questions with me, you can reach me out on my email jabezborja.dev@gmail.com, and it will reply to you back as soon as I can. And yeah, if you want to build something with PyFyre, you can visit the PyFyre website, pyfire.netlify.app, and you can see the documentation right there, and you can now, do a thing or two to PyFire. And if you want a community to help you, you can join our Discord server on PyFire Discord server. So if you have any questions with building PyFire, we can answer you there. And thank you so much for being with me. And yeah, thank you so much. And bye, guys. I can't really wait to see what you build. Thank you so much. Bye.
From Sonny Valdez. Maybe this will be mentioned later, but here's my question. Is the browser underneath Chromium or something else?
Hello. Yeah. So yeah. The sorry. What was the question again?
Is the browser underneath Chromium or something else?
No. It PyFire uses Brighton that transpiles your Python code into native JavaScript. And yeah, so I hope that's answer your question. So it does not use Chromium or something like what do the npm I mean the node use like the V8. No, it just transpiles your Python code into native JavaScript.
All right. So, Sonny, we hope that answers your question. If you have any other follow ups, feel free to sound off once again in the chat.
Oh,
Moving
that's
on to our next question from Daniel Justin Barba. Does it also automatically re render UI elements once a state changes?
no, you have to explicitly just like what I did earlier at the element that you have to add a state, just like what she said that like it's like the use effect for React. But on the new version that we are developing right now, we have the create effect. So if you have like effects for something like the computed uh, data, and that is now developing, and I hope yeah that answers your question. Not the trans no transpiles, yeah. Sunny, sir, Sunny.
Yep. Next, I think I'd like to raise a question of my own. So you mentioned that you still are maintaining and working on PyFire and you have some changes in mind for future releases. So what's the direction that you have for PyFire in the next coming year or next few years?
So yeah, my plan for PyFire is to actually to promote the Python to be useful for web front end development, and yeah, that it will be like the first thing that whenever like I'm developing, that will be the first thing that comes to mind. That and yeah, but yeah, that I think that's it.
All right, so we're looking forward to that when PyFire becomes our go-to web development framework, especially to work on it in pure Python. Another question coming from me. I think you mentioned that you like Flutter a lot.
Yeah,
And
I do.
I think I've heard of a concept in Flutter. There's something in Flutter called pure Python. So there's already a way of using pure Python and Flutter. So is there anything that's very different between PyFire and that?
The what? Sorry, I didn't. There is like a new framework that also the same as Flutter, and it's pure Python.
Yep. I think it was called pure Python in Flutter.
Oh, okay.
So it uses
I haven't
Flutter.
heard of that actually, and it's just my first time having heard of that, so I don't really know, but I'll see. I'll check that.
All right. So for the rest of our audience, please feel free to ask the questions. Feel free to just send it in our chat in Vito. Once again, with the format that you put a question mark before typing down your question. So everyone, maybe we have more questions from the audience. Maybe you're curious. Maybe you want to collaborate, work with Sir Jabez in improving PyFire. Maybe we have any plugs here.
Yeah, I'll plug it. Yeah, it's PyFire is an open source project, so if you want to check the source code or contribute to it, you can check the GitHub, and yeah, and make sure just maybe put a star on it. That would be really appreciated.
All right. We actually also have somebody who asked if you could type your email. Perhaps they want to get in touch with you
Okay,
with regards to PyFyre. So Sir Jabez will
okay,
be sending his email in the Vito chat at the moment.
okay. So yeah, I've sent my email. So yeah, if you have any question, concern, you can reach out to me on that email, and I'll try to uh, answer your question if 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 you have any.
All right. So feel free to email Sir Jabez in the email he sent. So next, I think there's an interesting remark here coming from Sir Sonny. So he says, I am planning to see if I can teach this in my next workshop. Bonus is that it looks easy to teach. So perhaps was that a consideration when you were developing PyFyre, making it easier for developers, especially the self-taught programmers such as yourself that started with Python, making it
Yeah,
easier for them to do web development?
yes, yes. That was the actually the goal for PyFire, is because Python is, easy to understand programming language. But yeah, I think that PyFire has, uh have so many plans to it to make it more easy, because I know that it's quite really complicated, but it does the thing that, the reactivity, the boilerplate. So for Python to, to be running on the web front end. But I think in the future that will be more simplified. But we are like seeing towards to like being svelte, if you guys know svelte, so like that.
All right. So we have a new question coming in. I'll just paste it in our chat from our audience. Eric Lagasca. I hope I'm saying your name right. And their question is, how are subpages done? Like creating an about page. Do you make an about.py and put it beside the index.py or create subfolder about then index.py?
You can put it somewhere on SRC. It doesn't matter. You can just PyFire has a routing, but it's like React navigation. Like you have to create a routing object and pass it to the render, as you can see there. If you can see, no, I think can't. So you have to pass on the render the routing, the slash, and that will be like that.
All
I hope
right.
that I
So
make sense. Did I
yes,
answer
we
the
hope
question?
we answered the question. For any follow-ups, feel free to just send in the chat. We have a new question coming from Carl Venus. Their question is, if you haven't discussed it yet, what are some new features that you want to add in PyFire?
So yeah, the new features that we really looking forward to implement is what I showed earlier, the functional widgets, that you don't have to make it a class, because having a class widget is has a lot of boilerplate code, and that really irritates the developers, like really. So we are implementing the life cycles, the hooks, but we on React we call it like hooks, but on Python we call it like decorators. It's like that. We have the decorators that create effect, create memo, and everything like that. So you have to, everything out of the box, and we are on the way for that.
All right, so we hope that answers your question. Now we have another question from Daniel Justin Barba. How do you pass a value to another screen?
To pass a value to another screen is just like the nesting widget. Is you have to call your widget to the widget. I mean, to the widget itself, and you can just pass it on the parameter, and that will be the you can pass the a variable to that widget to, like, yeah, yeah.
All right. So I think I'd also like, I hope that answers your question, Danielle. I'd also like to ask another question. So How did you arrive at the idea all of a sudden of creating PyFire? Because based on your bio earlier, I think you're quite young and you're self-taught as well.
Yeah.
So how did it suddenly occur to you or your friends, the team that you developed this with, that, oh, we want to make a front-end framework for Python?
I just came up with the idea. Like I really like React the way it is, but I also love Python. So I think that why is there not like frameworks that front end but in Python? So at first I developed it without the Brighton, the what we depend on. We just has had a server, but it doesn't really make sense, and so we rewrote the entire framework from scratch, and yeah, and it became really serious. So it was just a side project at first, and yeah.
That's really great to hear. We have another follow-up question from Eric Lagasca. How does PyFire compare to PyScript?
Okay, I just heard of PyScript. Uh, PyFire is a it is batteries included framework. So everything you can have the state management, the routing, and everything you need to create a web front end framework. I mean a web front end application from ground up. So I think PyScript is it just like vanilla JavaScript on the HTML itself, but PyFire is a out of the box, like it is a framework.
All right. So, Eric, we hope that answers your question. I think I also want to ask, since React, we have React JS, right? You mentioned React, you like React, and then React expanded to have React Native to have cross-platform applications that can also be deployed on mobile. Do you have any similar plans for PyFire in the future?
Sorry, where's the
Uh,
question?
no, sorry, it was
Oh,
coming from me. It's a
oh,
question
I
from
thought
me.
I was looking for it on the comment section. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. So yeah, we have React, then we had React Native, which allows us
Yeah,
to develop the applications for mobile. So is there any similar hopes or plans for PyFare in the future to make it
yeah,
functional on
actually
mobile?
maybe because Kiwi is not at, if you know Kiwi, it is like a framework also, or library that allows you to create a mobile application from Pyth to with Python. So maybe I don't know, I can't say, but maybe there will be a plan for PyFire to implement as for mobile development. And yeah, I let's see.
Okay. We'll be looking forward to wherever PyFire goes in the future. Now we have another question from Carl Venus. I don't know if it has been asked yet, but can you provide a rough glimpse on why PyFire integrates so well with existing JavaScript applications?
Yeah, you can actually like put on the HTML that I showed earlier, the template.html, you can actually put a script on it, and then you can use the PyFire API to manipulate that. Like you can put script of jQuery and use jQuery inside of PyFire. So I think that will be the question.
All right. So, Carl, we hope that answers your question. Now, I think I also, as somebody who's also really early in their comp sci career, I'm curious because I think in terms of coding experience, we have the same number of years, but you've done so much more. You even have this PyFire and all the things you've developed and co-founded. So, for all fellow young developers, self-taught programmers, or even those who are taking up computer science degrees, but there's so many gaps in their knowledge because, you know, college school doesn't really teach you everything. There's so many things in the industry right now that you don't really learn from school. So, do you have any message for them, those who want to get better but are scared of starting, don't really have the confidence to start any big projects like PyFire? Do you have a
Uh,
message for them?
Yeah, I don't really know if I can say anything about that. Like, but my message is just, to learn programming is just, you have to create a lot of projects. Like, over the course that you are creating a projects, you learn throughout the process. So yeah, you just learn with creating more projects by projects.
All right. So for everybody out there, especially the young people early in their career, we hope those words motivate you. Just create projects. I probably have to do that after this conference as well. So do we have any more questions from the audience? Maybe we can give a few more minutes to wait for those who want to ask their questions. We have some feedback coming from the chat from Jeff. He says, I'm amazed. Congrats, Jabez, and to your team. We love the energy.
Thank you.
A lot of PyFire enthusiasts here, and I know everybody's looking forward to what PyFire can offer in the future.
Yeah, but PyFyre is still not really ready for production. It is for maybe experiment, but because PyFyre is still on alpha, so you don't have to expect that much. But yeah, but we are looking forward to make it beta, and to make it ready for production. But we have a PyFire running on production, just like our website, PyFire website. It is a PyFire running on Netlify, but you can publish also in Brazil, AWS, because it serves like a static website.